Breaking news, this is your World War III update. I'm happy to inform everybody that for once, everything's going to be just fine. So I'm told. I must humbly concede defeat to the Bulls because I've been wrong about a lot. All of us preppers have been wrong. Nothing bad is ever going to happen. We should have confided in our normalcy bias instinct all along and went all in on Bitcoin long ago. I concede defeat entirely. There's nothing bad that has happened in the last 24 hours that is newsworthy, with the small inconvenient exception, of course, of this whole tactical nuclear drill thing, which isn't really bad. It's a nothing burger according to the mainstream media anyways. Just one man who's got his back up against the ropes and is bluffing with tactical nuclear drills, very proximate, I should add, to the high-intensity conflict zone in the eastern part of Europe. And, of course, they actually have live nuclear warheads on them. But it's just a drill, okay? So, again, I think this is a nothing burger. I think the market speaks for itself. Everything is going to be just fine. And, in fact, what I would encourage people to do, I usually don't give financial advice on this channel, but I got to say, it's a great time, despite all the flashing red economic indicators, because the only thing that matters is what's on the surface, and that's the markets going up and the crypto going up and all that stuff. What I would strongly recommend you do is take any material asset and liquidity that you have at this point in time, and you convert that into something intangible, okay? You follow me? Immaterial, and something inaccessible, meaning that if the grid goes down, you can't access it, okay? You want to make sure, the only way to make money, you got to be in it to win it. You got to give your wealth, your hard-earned wealth, to somebody who's far away to manage it. This is not a time to be chickening out and putting in your money into things with intrinsic material value that you can actually use if times get bad, because times are never going to get bad. I mean, this whole tactical nuclear bluster is just that. It's not going to amount to a hill of beans, as they say. So, yeah, I would strongly encourage people to just throw in the towel, man. You know, the media hegemons are right. Our leadership class would never, ever lie to us. I mean, they've never lied to us before. And let's face it, even if shit hits the fan, we know what's going to happen, right? I mean, we've seen what happened during the pandemic. You know what that means? If the nuclear bombs drop, imagine the size of the stimmy check that we're all going to get to take to Bartertown if and when it goes down. So, yeah, I guess I'm going to pack it in, and it's been nice knowing you. And, I mean, I suppose we could go over some other, insignificant odds and ends and newsworthy stories. Not even really newsworthy. I mean, we're talking about space-based warfare and all of this stuff and possible assassination attempts that were co-facilitated by nation states. But yeah, I mean, okay, well let's do it. Okay, that's the end. I've exhausted my sarcastic gas tank for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But on a more serious note, and this is the only way you can approach these matters is hysterically. Nowadays, that's the only way to maintain our sanity, it would seem. Russia is claiming that the U.S. is militarizing space, but the U.S. is claiming the converse. Now, interestingly, if you guys remember, on May 16th, Russia released a notice to airmen that they were going to be doing some sort of test in and around off the coast of California. Not quite off the coast, but near California, which is a total flex when I explain to you exactly what's going on. Well, essentially what they were doing, according to the US government, is they were deploying a space-based counter-space weapon of some sort. Remember all that news about how the Russians were planning on putting weapons in space and possibly nuclear weapons in space? Well, that NOTAMs was actually in reference to the satellite that was launched, or the weapon that was recently launched. So today, Russia comes out and counters that accusation and saying that the United States has confirmed its true plans to militarize space by voting against Russia's draft resolution on preventing an arms race in space at the UN Security Council. So you see what's happening here. Both sides are denying that they're militarizing space, but both sides are definitely actively militarizing space. And look at that flex that the Russians just did by dropping the rocket off the coast of California, issuing that notice to airmen on May 16th that that rocket would be landing in the middle of the ocean. And now the US comes out with this information that they have intelligence that in fact Russia was putting a counter space-based weapon into space. Was this a nuke? Was this an EMP? Was this some sort of electronic warfare? Was it a laser weapon? I mean, who knows what it could possibly be, but that's where we're at, okay? And this is confirmed 110%. The Russians are accusing the Americans of what the Americans are accusing the Russians of. That means that both sides are up to no good. And the fact that the Russians are conducting nuclear drills, okay, on their border, and it should be known that what they're doing here is they're training their troops in covert deployment, preparations to strike, and the delivery of these nuclear weapons to troops. So the fact that they're doing it so close to Ukraine is clearly telegraphing to the West that we mean business, okay? The exercise is going to involve the delivery of nuclear weapons to troops, covert deployment. You know, you guys all know my favorite anti-SHTF looter sign is looters will be sniped. Why is that so important? I'm not saying they're going to be sniped, Canadian government. I'm just saying that, you know, if I had to use a sign in the apocalypse, that's what it would say. Looters will be sniped. Why would I write that on the sign? Because then you don't know where it's coming from, right? So they're telegraphing that they're going to be using covert deployment, meaning that you're not going to be given any sort of signal and they're not going to be able to detect if a tactical nuclear launch was imminent. So this is incredibly serious stuff. And anybody who thinks Russia has this in the bag, you have to ask yourself, if Russia is winning this war with flying colors, as all the Russophiles claim, why on earth would they be putting tactical nuclear weapons on the border? You know, our buddy Scott Ritter, not really our buddy, he refuses to come on the channel for reasons unbeknownst to me, but he claims now, and his viewpoint is now resonating with our viewpoint that we've been saying since day one, that this thing is going to go nuclear. Now he is sounding the alarm, but not in the way that you would think. He is now saying that the United States, and I've floated this theory once or twice, is actually planning a preemptive strike, okay, a decapitation strike against China and Russia because we are the ones who are running out of options. So the onus is on Russia and the Chinese to be the reasonable adults in the room and try to avoid escalating this further. But what do you have? You have Russia doing tactical nuclear drills, telling us that if you continue with the S-16s, with the ATACMS, you got Victoria Nuland coming out today and saying, yeah, we need to enable the Ukrainians to target deep inside Russia, making this officially, because it already unofficially isn't a proxy war. The Ukrainians have been attacking Russia proper with American, UK weapons, and really it doesn't matter if the weapons, it's the financing of it all. Okay, so they've been being financed by NATO and the Americans for the longest time. So this has been beyond a proxy war for the longest time. But because the Russians value jurisprudence, they have not went over the edge just yet. But the fact that they're now doing these tactical nuclear drills is incredibly significant, and people should take note of it. There's a lot of other crazy theories being floated right now. We're going to go to the map in a bit. Let's just get the tactical nuclear drills back on screen again, just to give us some food for thought. The leader of Estonia, or the leader, I don't know if you can call her that, Kaja Kallas, has proposed the Balkanization of Russia. So they want to break Russia up into bite-sized little pieces. See, everybody's saying the quiet part out loud. Russia's doing tactical nuclear drills. Victoria Nuland is saying take out the Russian nuclear facilities or whatever it is that she's implying. I'm sure it's even worse than that. David Cameron, the British Foreign Secretary, has similarly suggested that Ukraine has the right to strike targets inside of Russia. Now you have the leader of Estonia, who also admitted that NATO troops are already in Ukraine, training Ukrainian troops, say that they need to break Russia into little bite-sized pieces that everyone can imperialize. So that's what Russia's contending with, and that's why there are nuclear weapons. And this isn't a drill. People need to understand that this is just a higher level of combat readiness being deployed near the war zone. Okay? Russia also today indicated that they were unilaterally and arbitrarily changing the borders in the Gulf of Finland. So this is the borders. Of course, you know the whole meme. They want to make the Baltic a NATO lake, and they want to cut Russia off from accessing the Baltic because, of course, in order to pass through there, they got to go through Estonia and Finland, okay? And now we know that the border with Finland's been closed for a long time. Things have been heating up with Estonia. But you know what? Just like I said, forget about it. Just go dump all your money into the markets right now. Don't buy tangible assets, food, ammo, you know, all that kind of good stuff that you're never going to use anyways. Just go into the markets. Forget about all this. This is the border right now in the sea. Now, Russia has extended it. I don't know the exact boundaries in which they've extended it. But essentially what you have going on here, we're going to talk about the Iranian thing in a moment. Going to go back to the map. People miss the map. So this is the region in question. And of course, some people, myself included, suspect that Ukraine is actually using the Baltic Sea to launch drones, although there's no actual evidence of that. But some people have postulated that in the past. So we have now the Russians basically pushing the boundaries in this neck of the woods, which could be another potential flashpoint for escalation. So we have the Baltic Sea, we have Moldova, we have Azerbaijan, we have Georgia, we have Ukraine, we have just everywhere across the board, just could all go up at the same time. In Poland today, and I don't know if this was a story that was just released today, I think it was yesterday, 9 Russian spies, and this is how you know we've gone full hybrid war, because I don't think there's been any Russian suspects arrested for actual acts of sabotage inside Europe up until now. So this story is major if true, because there's been a recent spat of fires, not only in ammunitions facilities across Western countries, but also just random fires at like shopping malls and things like that. So in Poland, they're claiming that 9 Russian spies have been detained for planning acts of sabotage. Polish Prime Minister has assessed the matter as very serious. He pointed out that the situation concerns several European countries, including Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland, also adding that there are similar signals coming out from Sweden. So the hybrid war just means less than a world war. It's what you see in the run-up to a world war. So you have a proxy war, which is 2 countries fighting it out in somebody else's country. Then you have a hybrid war, which is like asymmetrical style warfare, assassinations, like we're seeing right now, targeting things via cyber attack, okay? The various international guerrilla style tactics that are not necessarily a direct high intensity conflict, but they are things that nonetheless still have a noticeable material effect, a negative effect on the economy and the security of a nation state. So in addition to that, we have almost bit my tongue there. We have an alt media blackout in Poland. Now this is from my Polish source. They claim that at least 3 popular Polish YouTube info channels have stopped broadcasting about a month ago. I'm not sure if I should name these channels, but I might as well. The Info Pigula, the Infrastruktura, and the Wiadomości Polska until April 2024 made at least 2 to 3 updates per week, sometimes even on a daily basis, now more than a month. The Info Pigula channel is silent, and the other 2 channels have vanished from YouTube. Now, the official media broadcast, as well as the online broadcast, is mostly controlled by the government and the big business related to it. As you might have guessed, he's pronounced guest, or he wrote guest, like as in a guest as in your house. The media don't tell society about the tragic situation in Ukraine and the real risk of conflict in Poland. Only a few journalists talk the truth, and most of them are called pro-Russian if they talk too much out of the official line. So the hammer is most certainly coming down in Poland. They are getting ready for war every which way from Sunday. In fact, they're building a $10 billion border wall along Kaliningrad and Belarus. And the leader of the country reiterated and alleviated concerns today, well, not to anybody who's a thinking person. Don't worry, we're not going to mine the border and violate the Ottawa Convention just yet. Eventually, they're going to probably have to do that, but they're not going to do it just yet. But the value of this border investment is going to be $2.5 billion USD for a total border length of 400 miles. This is going to be called the Eastern Shield, insurpassable line of fortifications. How would you feel if you're Ukraine and you're seeing NATO build up this massive border essentially between you and them? Now, this is between Belarus and Poland, so not between Ukraine and Poland, but Ukraine and their people who are resisting this mobilization push right now are making their own border fortifications in the form of a truckers' protest. Most people didn't catch wind of this, but in fact, there are Ukrainians, because they're kind of trying to keep a lid on this. And this is the thing, that both the Poles, the Polish government, and the Ukrainians right now appear to be in cahoots to suppress any sort of media that might stoke dissent and unrest. And you had to really be paying close attention to know that the truckers in Ukraine actually staged a protest recently, because they would have been forced to concede their information to enlistment offices if they wanted to maintain their driver's license. Now, this is happening with numerous professions all around Ukraine right now. They're currently cannibalizing their workforce to send them all to the front lines, which of course is a losing battle. But you even have female doctors now in Ukraine who cannot get their medical licenses unless they report to an enlistment office and take all the physical checks, because of course they're going to be conscripted for front lines as well. The Polish government itself is also accelerating conscription, and the reason why I'm bouncing back and forth, because these two things are very intertwined, and they correlate, very well in terms of Polish mobilization coinciding with Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is obviously much further along in this, but in Poland, people are starting to get suspicions that the rapid militarization that is happening there under the guise of steadfast defender is in fact preparation for actual war. The Polish government has introduced an accelerated training program for young people to enlist in the military. The program is called Vacation with the Army. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? And it starts from June 10th. Each training will take 27 days and is aimed for all citizens in the age of 18 to 35. Each participant will earn $6,000, whatever that is, the equivalent of $1,500 USD. What is important to note is that all the participants will finish the course by formally entering the Polish Reserve Forces, and then in case of mobilization will be called upon without the need to draft them. Okay, so yeah, you're getting paid. It's kind of like a bit of a bait and switch, right? And Poland is getting ready to unveil some plans. Poland, in conjunction with the EU, are getting ready to unveil plans for a European version of the Iron Dome. This is going to be in addition to the European Sky Shield initiative. also called the ESSI. According to the German military, the ESSI will consist of US-supplied Patriot missile batteries, German medium-range Iris-T missile launchers, as well as Arrow 3 anti-ballistic missiles, and I presume, on top of that, whatever the Israelis are using for their Iron Dome. Now, I don't know what they would envision actually needing an Iron Dome system for, considering that one would have to surmise that if the Russians were going to go to war with NATO, it's very unlikely that they would be shooting little drones that could be taken down or little bottle rockets that the Iron Dome is proficient in targeting and are more than likely going to be utilizing the big guns, okay? And this is the problem, and I must reiterate this, that when NATO and Russia begin to deplete their conventional weapons stockpiles, they will be left with no other choice but to either negotiate, which neither side seems interested in doing, or they're going to have to leverage the nuclear tactic. It's simply a matter of who is going to have the balls to do it first, or the balls or the galls to use it first. And I say that because whoever uses it first essentially makes a point. And the whole idea of escalate to de-escalate is, the Karaganov doctrine, is that if one side uses a nuclear weapon, it shows the other side that they mean business and that maybe the other side is going to back down and make some concessions. But when you really look at this thing, I mean, it's looking like a duck, it's quacking like a duck, but the markets are green. I'm thinking we're going to nuclear war. But what do I know? Zelensky is now officially a legitimate military target. Dmitry Medvedev has claimed that Zelensky was always a military target, but now he certainly needs to be brought to justice, and there is no longer trust in former partners, and therefore the best guarantors for Russia will be its high-precision weapons and a strong army. Medvedev tells you the actual plan. When Medvedev says they're going to Odessa, they're going to Kiev, he's not being hyperbolic. He's being real. Okay, that is the true voice of the Russian strategy right there, because really that's the only ultimate solution. I mean, this whole idea that they have to create this sanitation line, when you really think about it, it makes no sense from a logical point of view, because every time you expand the sanitation line and you put your guys on the front of that sanitation line, well, then you now have to defend that. Right? And so the sanitation line perpetually encroaches deeper and deeper into NATO territory until it's right up against Poland and the Baltic states, of course, who are going to be next either way. When you have a leader threatening to break up Russia into little pieces, I mean, we all know how this story is going to end. It's simply a matter of timelines. How long is it going to take is really ultimately the question. And if you're a Ukrainian living in Europe, you are now legally obligated by your government, based on the recent mobilization law put into place on the same day that Zelensky is no longer a legitimate military leader, according to Russian media. Now you will be enlisted from abroad. Fortunately, not a lot of European countries are actually going to dignify this law. I'm told at least not out in the open. I'm sure there's going to be some secretive stuff that is happening with these countries to try to get people extradited. But, you know, it's not looking good. But again, the fog of war is very thick. So Russia would not be using tactical nukes and not be flexing in this manner if their backs weren't up against the wall. So it's important to keep that in mind. What else do we got to talk about today? Okay, I guess we should jump to Israel and Iran, because I suspect that my gut instinct about this situation, initially it was like, okay, I kind of waffled between, yeah, I could see the weather being problematic for a helicopter, but then I'm thinking to myself, this just makes no sense whatsoever. We just had, I mean, everything that's gone on between Iran and Israel in the last 3 months, the assassination attempt on Robert Fico, which we now know, according to Reuters, of all places, apparently he had some help, that he didn't act alone, that there was actually a group behind him. The Russians are claiming that group is linked to the Ukrainians. Anyways, neither here nor there. Well, it is here and everywhere, of course, because we live in a globalized world that's on the brink of nuclear Armageddon. But this Iranian story is very concerning because I'm thinking that when the Iranians do their investigation, I think they're going to find something. And if they find something, they're going to leverage that politically. I don't think it's going to lead to an immediate retaliatory response on whoever the culprits were, because we don't know. This could be an inside job for all we know, okay? This could be some rogue elements within Iran. This could be the Azerbaijanis, probably not, but you never know. It could be the Israelis, could be the Americans, could be the Saudi, could be anybody, right? But it's looking very suspicious on the basis of a testimony by one of the pilots of the other 2 helicopters that didn't go down. Now, this rather extensive testimony details how they claim that the weather actually wasn't that bad at all, and that the helicopter that went down with the foreign minister and the president, there really is no, at least on the surface, any reasonable explanation why it went down and the other 2 helicopters didn't. So was this some sort of electronic warfare? Was this an act of sabotage? It probably wasn't anything kinetic, I'm to presume, but it could have been something cyber. Somebody could have sabotaged that helicopter. Why was it just that helicopter? I mean, you think about it, there's only a 33% chance. I say only, but if any helicopter should have went down, you think that that would have been the last one to go down. Because, of course, that would be the one that you'd want to protect the most. I mean, your leader's on it. So something is not right there. And I also find it rather coincidental that on the day after that happened, the International Criminal Court came out and issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. I just found that kind of weird. Now, are they just doing that to try to create the illusion that the international community, in spite of supplying Israel with weapons and financing and basically looking the other way and only leveraging it for political purposes when it's useful, kind of like our government does here, speaking with a forked tongue, are they just masquerading as being the good cop in order to take attention away from this possible assassination? It's very possible. And now the Russians are going to help investigate. And the Russians are playing this one very neutral. When I read the Russian take on this on Russia Today, I try to use all media sources, guys, even ones that, I don't agree with, because I'm trying to get a balanced point of view. And it's very hard to do that when the fog of war is thick. So this is why I leverage those Russian sources, because quite frankly, they're as true or have been as true in the past few years as the Western ones. Anyways, on Russia Today, they were reporting it almost from a pro-Western point of view, which I found surprising. But then you have Vladimir Putin, who's about to go there, and this guy doesn't leave the country that often, especially in this period of time where tensions are riding so high and you got people being attempted to be assassinated. He's only going there with the escort of 4 fighter jets. The fact that he is going there says something. It also is interesting that he's offered to help in the investigation with Iran. So are they going to find something is the question. And I'm not 100% convinced that the Russians have Iranians' best interest in mind. It's quite possible that the Russians are going to try to leverage this to their interests, and that they are going to potentially try to drum something up between Israel and Iran. Even if there isn't anything there, maybe there's going to be a few leads. Regardless, there's always going to be this plausible deniability around this incident, where in many Iranians' minds, all they need right now is some little anecdotal circumstantial evidence to push them in that direction. And I think in the upcoming election in Iran, I mean, this could have been the Ayatollah for all we know. I mean, it could have, right? For all we know, what they're going to do is they're going to gauge public opinion, and they're going to use this incident politically to either galvanize people towards some common purpose, whatever that might be. Could be the acquisition of nuclear weapons or a reason for nuclear weapons. We're not safe. We need this nuclear deterrent. It could just be for political purposes. It could be to go into a hot war with Israel or take a more aggressive stance with Israel. But I have a feeling that they have a wild card here that they can play now. They can just accept that it was an accident, or if they wanted to, they could find a few leads. Not necessarily anything conclusive, but even a few leads, any doubt at this point in time that this was an act that was perpetrated by some country in the West, this would definitely have massive repercussions throughout the region. And it's definitely going to increase the amount of hostility and conflict throughout the region. Now, what is likely going to happen in addition to that is teasing out these people's views on nuclear weapons. Because according to the Quran, and I'm not going to be 100% accurate when I say this, but nuclear weapons are prohibited, okay? So there would have to be some sort of amendment made in order to allow for the facilitation of nuclear weapons inside Iran. And perhaps they can justify it on the basis of some theocratic principle that has yet to be brought to the public's attention. It's hard to say. But we do know that the guy who is now going to be the foreign minister, because the foreign minister died in that crash as well, he had emerged as one of the main critics of the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, which agreed to curb its nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. So after the US withdrew and reimposed sanction in 2018, Bagheri accused Hassan Rouhani of giving the West the impression that Iran is very weak. So he wasn't a signatory, at least not officially, to the deal of the nuclear deal with the West. So he thought that it wasn't a good deal. And he was proven correct, I suppose, because Trump withdrew from it. So this guy, who's far more hawkish on the nuclear front, is now in the driver's seat. And this idea that the leadership class, the foreign minister, that anybody but the theocracy or the army of the IRGC don't have any power, I think is misinformed. Clearly, they have a certain degree of administrative pull. They are making, they are doing things, I guess you can consider them like advisors. And yes, the supreme leader has the final say, kind of like the Roman emperor. He is going to do, what the crowd wants, ultimately at the end of the day. Yes, there's going to be crackdowns and authoritarian style crackdowns if people get too far out of line. But for the most part, they want to maintain order. And that means appeasing the zeitgeist. So they're going to do, whatever is advised. Much like, I'm not going to say he's a figurehead, certainly yay or nay on these issues. But at the end of the day, this administrative class still does have power that we must respect. So it could definitely dictate how this whole thing plays out. Now, there was some rumor circulating today that an Iranian intelligence chief in the Loristan region was assassinated. And I originally had posted about this and I retracted it afterwards, and I made an apology because the last thing I want to do is be perpetrating false narratives. It seemed like it was credible at the time, and I still do think there's some credibility to it, but I think it's a confluence of different incidents, different imagery, and even names of people who are involved that are being conflated, and it just wasn't an accurate story. But I would not be surprised that if the Mossad and the Iranian intelligence services are still battling it out in the shadows. What else do we got for you guys today? I talked briefly about how the Slovakian Prime Minister Fico's attacker may not have acted alone. This is according to Reuters. Interior Minister Matis Sadej Estok said an investigation team has now been set up. One factor suggesting the involvement of other persons was that the suspect's internet communications were deleted 2 hours after the assassination attempt, but not by the suspect and most likely not by his wife. This indicated the crime may have been committed by a certain group of people. So somebody deleted this guy's internet history, okay? Not sure why the news just popped up there, the fake news. So the Russians, according to Western media, there is now a Russian disinfo campaign which is trying to perpetuate the false narrative that this was the Ukrainian intelligence services that had something to do with this. I think that would be quite the audacious move for the Ukrainians. It would be a gamble. I don't know if there'd be too much to gain from that. I think there would be a lot to lose, but I guess we'll find out. There's also some rumor, but I would say from a fairly credible source. I'm going to go into greater depth about this story in the future because it's getting a little late here. North Korea, China, and Russia are building a joint nuclear submarine base, I should say, and it's going to be in the Sea of Japan. Most people don't know, but there's a place where North Korea, China, and Russia all border one another. And it's right at the mouth of this river, the Tumen River. Okay, so right about here, right off the coast of the Sea of Japan, right across from Japan. So there's Japan, and this is where allegedly they're building a nuclear submarine base. This was something that was discussed at the meeting with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. The location has been chosen, island at the mouth of the Tumen River. It's going to be very similar to some of China's other concealed submarine bases or suspected covert bases that they have throughout the region. And this is going to allow for the consolidation of activities between the North Koreans, the Russians, and the Chinese in terms of their submarine activity. It's going to be constructed under the guise of civilian developments. So that's the most crucial point of note. And China has also responded to U.S. sanctions by sanctioning Boeing and other suppliers of weapons to Taiwan. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, not much to see here, okay? Everything is just fine. Klaus Schwab has stepped down, so people are going to find a new scapegoat, unfortunately. The EPA is warning us about cyber attacks on the water critical infrastructure, something we've spoken about at length before. Marco Rubio is predicting a U.S. election low-intensity civil war, insisting that neither side will accept the election results. And that's about all I got for you today. I would strongly encourage people, now is the time to get your seeds in the ground, do some experimentation, survival garden, limitless growth, 15,000 seeds, even if you're not a gardener. This is so lightweight. This is a great barterable item for SHTF. And if we open up one up here, and I'm going to be planting some of these this weekend, some more I should say, you got all these little baggies of different types of seeds, okay? Not the kind of seeds that you'll get arrested for in some countries, but the kinds that are actually edible, a good kind of edible that doesn't have any funny psychoactive effects. You can get those at CanadianPreparedness.com. Even if you're not going to plant a garden, put them in a cool, dry place for safekeeping, because you never know when the lights are going to go out. And this is why, all kidding aside, you want to have a certain degree, and this is not financial advice, but I will say that myself personally, I'm in tangibles, okay? I'm in things with intrinsic value that are near me, because as the saying goes, possession is 9/10 of the law. Thanks for watching, my friends. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.